Nigel, welcome to our podcast series. We're going to be talking about natural language understanding in this series and really diving into various elements around artificial intelligence and what kind of data science workflows are being built today. Let's pull some of that apart, have a bit of fun with it as well, I think. But with that in mind, so I'm Jack Watts. I am the EMEA AI Business Development Manager for NetApp. But I don't think you should really care about that in this podcast series, if I'm honest with you. Nigel is my superstar, good friend of mine, and I've known him for a good few years now, which is probably to detriment to this podcast also. Nigel, please introduce yourself. Tell us about you.
Yeah, blimey, Jack, I think you've done it all for me there, haven't you, really? So I'm Nigel Cannings. I'm the CTO of Intelligent Voice. I have been working with AI and machine learning for a very long time now. I have the dubious honor, I think, of being the first person to make speech recognition run on an NVIDIA GPU card for all the good it's done me over the years. Jack and I go back a long way. He was actually instrumental in getting me into machine learning in the first place at NVIDIA back in the day. We do a lot of work with speech. We do speech recognition, natural language understanding, and in really kind of secure environments, so banking and legal and places like that. So the places where traditionally people are a bit spooked by AI and machine learning. So it'd be really interesting, Jack, just to kind of kick some of these issues around during the podcast series.
Absolutely. And, with that in mind, that's really where you've kind of built your business on, was around that sort of regulatory compliance. But if we go back 6 years ago now, probably, where you had this slightly younger faced Jack Watts come into your offices, you were the first startup really that I spoke to. And really started to understand your business very quickly. And that light bulb moment came to me that it was just like, you guys should work very closely with NVIDIA at that time. And you actually pivoted your business a little bit, right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, when we first started, we were doing speech recognition for banks, basically. We were listening into phone calls and trying to stop people doing naughty things. It's fundamentally what it came down to. But we were doing it on CPU. It was really slow. And we were actually building speech models for each individual trader. So that meant we actually had to take a load of kind of phone calls from a trader and transcribe them and do stuff with them.
Yeah.
And it's the fault of my younger self when I saw an advert which said, do you want a supercomputer on your desk? And it was about 2007 when I saw one of those very old NVIDIA workstations that they were using for oil and gas.
Dev boxes.
Exactly. And my wife was very clear with me that as I didn't do any oil or gas drilling, and I didn't have 15 grand in my pocket at the time, that I wasn't allowed to buy one. And it was kind of came to me, that hang on, maybe these supercomputer things can do speech processing. And as it turns out, they weren't supposed to. And all the NVIDIA engineers told me you weren't supposed to be able to do it, and everyone else did, but we managed to subvert the architecture. And yeah, so the business, we suddenly went from being a business that was using a lot of CPU power to a business that was actually just using a handful of GPU cards to kind of pummel huge amounts of data through, and really took off in terms of our ability to do really fast speech processing in financial services and doing it privately and securely. I think that was the important part of it.
Absolutely. And that's really where, that was on-prem, CPUs, stacks of them, poor Intel, by the way, going from stacks of down to, dual socket systems down to a couple of single socket or a couple of dual socket systems with a load of GPUs in. What was the reaction to the bank when you said, oh, I want to put a 2000 watt single U or 2U system in your bank? Were they a bit afraid of that at that time?
Oh, they hated it.
Yeah.
I mean, they absolutely hated it. I mean, GPU cards back then were the preserve of gamers and Monte Carlo simulations. And I think it was the same people in banks who were playing games on them and doing Monte Carlo simulations, depending on what time of day it was. So trying to get GPUs in at a wider level in banks was actually almost impossible initially. And it took a lot of work, and we actually worked very closely with the NVIDIA finance team to try and persuade customers that actually you could take a GPU card and put it into a data center. And it's really only quite recently, I think, that we're seeing that pivot within banks where they're actually saying, do you know what? We can now see the benefit of these GPU card thingies, and we'll add them to our standard builds. And that's the problem in a bank. They have a standard build. And
Yeah.
if the GPU card's not on a standard build, you can't get them put in place.
Oh, hey, I think we'll probably leave the talks of shadow IT versus internal IT departments to another time. But I think what's interesting for me is that from a workflow perspective, natural language understanding, actually, when it comes to spoken voice, starts with that ASR piece, right? What are the particular elements that you go through there? So in my mind, I think about there's language detection, dialect detection, before you actually get to that transcription piece.
Well, it's all part of the same kind of big mess, really, because when you get into a bank, the way people speak on the phone is almost incomprehensible. They speak a different language to us. You know, even in English, they speak a different language to us. The quality of the phone calls you get is atrocious. Quite often on speakerphones, people are shouting over a speakerphone at each other. So what you're actually doing is trying to make the whole process feed off itself. So if we're doing language detection, for example, what we actually do is we transcribe every single call in multiple languages simultaneously, which we can only do because we've got GPU cards to do it. So we've got one client who we do 12 simultaneous languages for every single call. And then we pick the one which was most successful effectively. But that's changing now that we're using some interesting work with spectrograms. If you're in my industry, we love spectrograms to build deep learning models which can determine what language is being spoken at any given moment in a phone call. Because a lot of these traders switch languages. You might go from English to Russian or Dutch to Russian or English to French, and so you need to be able to detect that on the way through. So we're building a kind of a wider ML pipeline now of doing that initial language detection, then putting it through speech recognition, then quite often putting it through some post-processing, because the quality of the transcription is not always as good as you want it to be, because people, as I said, are shouting over squawk boxes and that type of thing. So it's very complicated to get anything reasonable out of, particularly on the trading floor. Slightly different in call centers, but the trading floor is a nightmare.
Yeah, and I think that's really taught you guys, which is now being shared with hopefully a lot of listeners, around those particular challenges, and it's actually sparked something in my mind, because I've been speaking to a very large multinational bank, and rather than on the trading floor, this is at the consumer end. They want to be able to transcribe customer calls, right? So, and they want to do that. They want to have kind of one methodology across all, and they're speaking to multiple ISVs. They're speaking to multiple vendors around those particular challenges. But they sort of they're thinking within country, in respect of going from taking language, dialect, regional, and then running the model, right? Picking the accurate model based on those three factors. But you've just raised a good point that people not only obviously speak in their not necessarily their mother tongue, but they may also change language throughout the call, right? And then
Yeah.
suddenly you've got to do that work again, and then do that all live within microseconds, because you're actually helping the agent on the other side of the line, right? Is actually helping and assisting on mortgage, insurance, whatever it is. That's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. No. If you're trying to do it based on where you think someone's calling from, you're almost inevitably going to fail. You have to be much broader in your approach to pick up kind of different dialects, different languages. Even in the same country, people speak in a vast number of different accents. In the UK, someone calling into a call center, it could be Czech accented English, Polish accented English. It could be Indian accented English. It could be Scottish accented English. All of those things
Could
need
be
to be
Geordie, could be
accommodated.
Brummy.
Exactly, any of those. So it's, that's one of our biggest challenges, is making sure you build models which can accommodate all of that. So I mean, the whole, and then people want 100% perfect transcript, and it's like, well, human beings can't do 100% perfect transcript. So my biggest question to people always is, why do you think you want a transcript? And they'll go, oh, don't know, actually.
Mm.
That's actually the first question before you go into anything, is what's the use case? What are you trying to get out of it? Don't try and say, I want this technology. What you should really be saying is, what's the solution I'm looking for? Am I trying to find people doing things wrong? Am I trying to search for stuff? Am I interested in how they feel? Start at that end and then work backwards is what I would say usually.
And that's very akin to where obviously I'm not just sort of pigeonholing myself in natural language understanding. Of course, I work across computer vision and various other AI aspects, but that's where it comes to my mind that this is all creating and curating a lot of different data points. But with that in mind, I think what we're going to do is pigeon that there, and really, I think I would welcome some comments and some descriptive arguments, perhaps from our hopefully large audience. And please look out for future episodes. And I look forward, and let's talk soon, Nigel. That was really good.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Jack. Always a pleasure. Speak to you soon.
All the best.
Cheers
Bye.
then. Bye. Bye-bye.